Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us on another episode of The BAM with Lori and Jenny. Today, we are super excited to have a conversation with Lori and Jenny. Jenny, are you excited?
I'm having conversation.
We decided it was time to do a catch-up, and we also would like to spend a little time talking about a subject that came up, and we thought our listeners would be very interested in hearing a little bit more about that. So, Jenny, welcome to Lori and Jenny.
Well, thank you. It's so nice to be here.
So I was having a side conversation with Jenny the other day. My 18-year-old stepson is about to go to college, and we were at dinner, and he brought up this conversation of saying, hey, I'm old enough to get a tattoo now. What should I get? And I kind of thought about this for a minute. And the first thing I thought is, if you have to ask what you should get for a tattoo, it's probably not time. And I had this conversation with Jenny about just because you can, should you?
Yeah.
And it kind of took us down a path of thinking about things we've done in our life because we could and we thought was a good idea. And then now maybe in hindsight, we're older, we're wiser, our opinions, our, trajectory has changed over time. And yeah, we wanted to talk about some of those topics today. And Jenny has a really personal story that she's going to share with us today. That it may not directly relate to everyone listening, but I think the premise of the story is good and we'll share that. So Jenny, you want to jump in and tell us a little bit more about your personal story and your journey?
Yeah. Well, I think, I don't remember how long ago, but I think you also had somebody reach out to you and ask questions about this specific topic.
I did. A close friend of mine made a suggestion and I loved it. She said, I have some questions that I would like to specifically ask Jenny about this topic that we're going to share with you all today. And I thought, wow, that might be something that other women are interested in also. So that leads us to our now.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'm going to drop a bomb now and then we'll go into all the history. But basically, it's about getting breast implants or maybe any kind of plastic surgery. But in my case, breast implants. So when I had both kids. I think my youngest was 2. So Chelsea was 2. And I was about, not quite 40, a little bit under 40. And I was like, no, not 40, 30. I was a little under 30.
30, okay.
Actually, no, I don't even know how old I was. Maybe 35, 30. I was right around 30 something and 32 maybe. And I was like, okay, I don't know why I was thinking I was somewhat close to 35 and that I wanted to do something big, I think Sean was talking about a big birthday for him. And so I was like, well, I'm going to get in on this too, And so I was like, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? And at the time I remember thinking, and I don't know why this popped into my head, probably because I had 2 little kids and your body changes so significantly. But I thought, you know what? I think I want to get implants. But the thing, I don't actually know if I ever told you this. There's one other part of my body. I mean, you always have like gripes about certain parts of your body, right? But there's one other thing that I've always really struggled with, and it's my nose. And I think that there was a kid when I was little that said something about my nose, and then it took off. And then certain people hammered me about my nose my entire childhood. And so I always was like, I have a giant nose, and I need to get it fixed, all that kind of stuff.
So it's either a boob job or a nose job is what you're saying.
Okay. Yes. That is exactly what I'm saying. And so the funny part of that is I was telling a friend of mine and she said, this is how I made the decision. So this tells you a little bit about my mental state at the time and like priorities. And she goes, well, if you get your boobs done, nobody's going to notice your nose.
Exactly. It's going to draw their attention.
Yeah. So then I went down the rabbit hole of starting to do a bunch of research. And at the time, silicone implants had come back on the market. I went to the doctor. I did have a referral. That was one of the questions that one of our listeners asked us to talk about. I did have a referral, somebody who had worked with a couple of my friends. One had a reduction, one had, I think, an implant, and he came very highly recommended. So I went to him. And when I went to him, it was like, I don't want to be very big because I'm athletic. I don't want this to impede in my daily activities.
So when you say that, let's dive into it a little more. When you say I don't want them to be too big, but you also wanted them where people could notice them or not. Like, was this more a you thing or a them thing? Like,
it was very much a me thing. So I think that's a really good distinction. So after you have kids, you just are deflated, like 2 deflated balloons, right? And so I had gone from like a pretty full C, maybe a little D, to maybe a B, right? And it wasn't necessarily the size, but it was like they are just completely empty at that point, right? And so there's there's a lot of reconstruction that needs to happen or that you want to have happen. And then my clothes didn't fit right and all that kind of stuff. So when I went to him, I said, I don't want to be very big. Cause at that time too, it seemed like I still had the image in my head of like those people, like the strippers with the like
Yeah.
very, they call them high profile. I think when they like that you can see them just popping out your chest, right?
Well, I think it's always been like when you think of breast implants back in the
Yeah.
day, it was an all or nothing. Like you go
Yeah.
big or just don't do it.
Yes. And they also tell, like everybody says that doctors will say this, you read it, people say this, I wish I went bigger, I wish I went bigger. So I said, I don't want to go very big. I want to be this specific size. And I said, I want to be a B. And he said, I'm going to tell you right now, like I am going to do what's right for your body instead of, and that did freak me out. Cause I was like, and he goes, I am not a Hollywood type doctor. And I had seen his pictures and I brought in pictures of here's what I want kind of thing. But he's like, if small looks ridiculous on your body, I'm not going to do like super small. And if huge looks ridiculous, I wouldn't do huge, right? So I'm going to do what works with your body, but I know what you want and I'm not going to go like crazy outside that. So anyway, I was like, okay, so you put a lot of trust in them, right? And I will say he did a good job picking the size. I almost backed out of the surgery at a couple different points. One of them, I had this thought of if I like die on the table for some reason, and I've got two little kids, and Sean has to say like, "Mommy died because she was, getting her food." Like, how horrifying is that? And then the other, I think I just was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna be out of commission," and again, very active, and then you're down for like 6 weeks, and all the things. And so I didn't know if I wanted to really take that time off.
I have one more question I'm going to jump in with because I think this is something along the path when you were having those second thoughts. Did you ever think of another opinion from another doctor just to kind of like ease any of those thoughts of like, I don't know, just, this doctor saying, trust me, I know it's right.
Yeah.
Was that a thought in your head or were you like, okay, no, I've had friends, they've referred
This is
him.
going to sound crazy, but I'm pretty sure I did get a second opinion and still went back to him.
Okay, perfect.
But I honestly cannot remember 100%, but I'm pretty sure I did get a second opinion. And yeah, and I did have a lot of trust in him for sure. And I think you should, right? Like you should talk to people, you should, and he was really well known in Boulder. So I felt pretty comfortable with that. So anyway, I did decide to go through with it and loved him. He was fabulous. I do remember saying to him, can I just get a lift instead of implants? And at that time, they were really recommending, I don't know if they do this anymore, but they were really saying, if you're going to get a lift, we always put a little something in there so you've got some volume. So like, okay. And then we had the whole saline versus silicone discussion. And I remember going with silicone because saline apparently is cold. Apparently like saline feels a little bit colder. And I was like, well, I don't want that. And, and I think that they look more natural if you have the silicone. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. So I did do that. And it was I think they called it like gummy bear or the more thick one that it's supposed to not be like full liquid. So anyway, so got the surgery. I ended up having to get a lift on just one side, which is funny, but just one side. I did not have any drains in to make sure that you're draining fluid and stuff like that. I did not have to have that. I was bandaged. I got the surgery on a Tuesday before Thanksgiving because I was like, I need the long weekend to recover. I was back at work the following Monday.
Okay, I have questions with that. Okay, so you're working, you have a corporate job at the time. Yep. Were you very open with people about why you were not going to be showing up, taking some time off? Were you excited to tell people? Did you think you were going to be judged?
There was some concern of judgment, but I was like, it is what it is. So yeah, everybody knew. My team knew where I was going to be gone. I think like some of my clients knew why I was going to be gone because I was like, I'm going to come back. And I didn't know how noticeable it was going to be. So I didn't want to just show up one day and have big giant boobs and people be talk. I'd rather just bring it out in the open ahead of time. So I did. I was open with it. And I've always been open with it. So yeah, so I went back to work. I told the kids, I don't think they ever remember a time where we sat down and talked about it because it was just like a discussion.
Right. And they were young, right? They probably didn't
have 5 and Chelsea was 2. And I was like, and I remember Chelsea saying, well, or maybe it was Alyssa, but why are you getting them done? And I said, well, when you have a baby, they kind of go away. I'm getting them put back in. And she's like, okay, that's fine. And then, you can't lift for a little while. So I was like, I'm not going to be able to lift you for a little bit and all that kind of stuff. But Yeah, that was fine. I told my friends, again, I was open. I told my family. I waited until the day before to tell my dad because I was like,
Yeah, what
"Where?"
did he say? What was his thoughts at
Well,
the time?
he's very practical financially, and I just didn't know how he was going to be. But then all of a sudden I have this feeling like if something happens and it goes south, like if my kid had a surgery and I didn't know about it and all of a sudden I get a call that something went bad, I would be so upset, I'd feel terrible. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to tell him. So I called him the night before and his reaction really surprised me. I remember exactly what he said. He goes, "Jen, I wish you wouldn't." And he goes, "I just think you're perfect the way you are." And my dad he did not talk like that. So I was shocked.
Did that make you second guess your decision for that moment that he said it?
But yeah, a little bit. It was so sweet. And then he also told me that he had a girlfriend that had had hers done and then had gotten them removed, and he's like, "So, you might not want them forever," like that kind of thing. So it was actually a really good conversation about it. But I ultimately did go through with it, obviously. So that was 2007. And I want to make sure I answer all the questions.
Well, you look at the questions. I want to ask
Yeah.
one too. So after the surgery, was there a moment, because obviously you're in pain, it doesn't feel great. You've paid to basically inflict this pain on yourself.
Yeah.
Was the pain as bad as you thought it was going to be? Was the recovery easier than you thought?
Yeah.
And was there any kind of remorse at that moment of like, oh man, I really shouldn't have done this. Oh, what was I thinking? Or were you happy? Were you happy with the way they looked? Were you happy with the way they felt? You like your body in general? Did it
Yeah.
change in any other ways that you're like, okay, now my boobs look great, but now my ass looks big? Or
I was very happy. I was very happy with the way they looked. I was very happy. The recovery was, um, for those of you that haven't had children, you wouldn't know this, but when you're breastfeeding and you get engorged, it was a little bit like that. But then I had also mastitis when I was breastfeeding, and that was way more painful than this. So I was like, this is
easy.
not nearly as bad. And so I was happy with them, and the recovery was quick and not a problem. The one thing I was surprised about, so going back to the size thing, so it was like I want to be like a size B, maybe small C, right? And their implants are wider than your natural tissue. So your bra size is way bigger than you would think. So you obviously saw me when I had them. I don't think you would guess that I was like wearing a double D bra, but that's what I'd have to, if I actually got a bra, that's what I'd have to get. But I wore the small, medium, large, like literally shelf bras, because you don't need the support unless you're in, obviously like a sports bra I'd wear, but that was it. So yeah, they look as big as your bra size says they are.
But the doctor nailed it. He got the right size. You were happy with all of that. Okay.
Yeah, happy with recovery, happy with all the things. I was back to my normal life very quickly. I think, 6 weeks or whatever. And I do remember saying like, "Can you push-ups yet?" And he kept repeating like 6 weeks. And I was like, "But what?" He's like, 6 weeks. I'm like, these people deal with athletes that want to get back to it quickly. So he had it dialed and he's like, "Yeah, not happening. You're going to wait the full time." So that was kind of funny.
Oh, that's very interesting. Okay. So you get the breast implants, you're living life, you're enjoying the way that you feel, right? And are you getting comments from people that maybe, I mean, it's hard to get comments from people that don't know, or maybe, I mean, like, what was the reaction, I guess, from people? Did you get any, or sometimes people don't say anything? "Oh, your boobs look nice." Like, that's kind of weird and awkward. But
I know, right? I think if I hadn't told them I was getting them done, people wouldn't have even noticed. So
okay.
I'm also not the type of person that wears low cut shirts or very like super tight things. So going back to the whole, were you doing it for you or for somebody else? And like, it was very much for me. Like I didn't start wearing like low cut tops
Sure.
or, anything like that.
Come on, girls, let's go out.
Yeah. Anything, I was like still my modest self,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I don't think anyone would have even known had I not told them. Of course, then I'm like, would I have told them? I'm like, maybe I wouldn't have told them but you don't know until you haven't done.
Right. Yeah.
So
No, for sure. Okay. So let's fast forward now. So you have the implants, everything's good. You never had any issues with them. And then there's a moment, and you can tell us when this was, where you started to think differently about your choice.
yeah. So I do remember, again, exercising and running. I became a runner. And I do remember thinking multiple times, like, okay, not that they felt heavy. You just feel a little like, I don't even know, like awkward or, yeah, because they're not as heavy as your natural tissue. But I just felt it was extra weight, I guess, when I was running. And then little things like you can't lay on your stomach, like Superman's, like when you lay flat on your stomach and then you lift up, that is very uncomfortable. Or rolling over, going from laying on your back to rolling on your stomach in an exercise class or something like that was uncomfortable. So I remember those were so minor, but I
You
remember
could chest bump your friends if you did something you couldn't like
I could
run.
probably still, I could do that just fine. So I remember those things. And then, but it was really when I started getting into, so at this point, so they recommend you get them out at 10 years, at the time at 10 years. And so I kept thinking like,
Wait, get him out? I didn't know.
yeah. And I think just like any medical device, they might have extended the life of them now. I don't know. But I did go back and I did get them checked. And my doctor was like, they still look good. Everything's intact. I think you're fine to wait. So I did. And I don't remember, that might have been at 12 years or something. So I was like, okay. And then it got to the point where I either need to get them out or get them replaced when I do this, right? I have to do one or the other. So there's going to be a surgery. So you know that. And I started having some symptoms that I didn't know what they were. So I started having a lot of brain fog. I started feeling like I was putting on weight. And I started going down the rabbit hole of, is this potentially breast implant illness? Is there an issue that I need to be thinking about? And I just didn't know. And I also know that I've had autoimmune stuff since way before I got them put in. I was 19 when I first started with autoimmune stuff. But it turns out it was not breast implant illness. So I did not have any issues with that. But what it did make me think about was, I want to be as healthy as I possibly can going into this next phase of my life. And what does that look like? And what that looked like was not getting them replaced, but getting them removed. Because I guess there's a potential that it's contributing to inflammation or, my brain fog or anything like that. Why would I keep doing this? So got them out. It turns out there was all menopause symptoms. So it did not relieve those symptoms. I think that they were very much menopause related. But again, I was like, okay, if I get another set of them, I'll have to get a third set at some point in time or surgery again at some point in time to get them removed.
So here's a question. So when you went to the doctor, I assume you had the same doctor remove them as you had put them?
Yep.
Okay.
He was with me the whole time.
The whole journey. So what was, when you first approached him and said, you know what, I think I want to have these out, what was his response? Was he positive? Was he negative? Was he like, okay, like he didn't try to sway you any direction?
He was awesome. He's like, okay, that sounds good. I was like, I just feel like I want to go natural now, but I do want to lift. And he's like, great, that's what we'll do. He goes, what you do need to know though is that they'll be smaller than before you got them in. That was a little bit of a surprise to me, but I was like, it is what it is. That's fine. So, and then that recovery was, I did have drains, which I was super bummed about because I thought that was disgusting. And I was like always so grateful I didn't have drains, but it was fine. It wasn't that bad. That and the recovery was, there was more scarring and cutting and that kind of stuff. It's so interesting to put them in. They go like through
your nipple, right?
Yeah.
Or,
like they just do a little incision and then they like basically stuff them in there.
right.
To get them out, they cut and then pull them out. So it's super interesting. So getting them out, you actually have more damage being done than putting them in. So anyway, but the recovery, it wasn't that bad. Like, I don't remember it being that bad. Just healing. And
did you feel relieved? Did you feel regretful? What was your mental state now that you kind of now didn't have these breast implants?
Well,
how did you feel? I mean, physically, were you happy to be without?
Yeah, I was happy to be done. And I was happy that I didn't ever have to think about it again. Like I never had to think about, I have to set aside $15,000 or whatever, right?
Right.
To do this. I was very happy that that wasn't even a concern anymore. When I first saw myself without the bandages on, I was like, holy shit, like I have nothing there. So that was a shock and that took getting used to. And they call it, they fluff up, which is so funny. But they do, he's like, they will kind of like get some volume back. And they did. But I mean, I'm still flat as a board. But I don't care. I had forgotten I couldn't lay on my stomach. I'm like, I can lay on my stomach now. And clothes do a lot of good things for you. Bras do a lot of good things for you.
There's a lot of bras that do a lot of wonderful things.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm just thinking what questions other people would have. And I think, one of the main questions someone would have is, are you regretful? Are you regretful of going down this path? Are you happy you did go down this path? Because as we know, things change, right?
The things that crossed my mind. So I think it was 6,900 to get both of them done, including a lift on one side. And to get them out was about $15,000. To get them out and a lift, because I did get a lift, was about $15,000. So I did not think about the fact when I got them in that this was going to be an expense, even though like people said it to me, but I was like, yeah, whatever. That's a problem for another day. Right. So I didn't think about that. I also didn't think about having surgery again. What would it be like to go under again to get these out? You just, again, problem for another day. I don't know. It's funny because it's not that I regret it because I was happy with them.
Right, right.
Knowing what I know now, would I make a different choice? Probably. I think I probably would have just gotten a lift, but I don't know. I don't know.
Right. I mean, because like I said, you had them for what, 12 years or 12?
Dude, I had them for 17 years.
17, right? So,
yeah.
Like you look back at that 17 years and, you never had a problem. You were happy with the way you looked. And so it's kind of like anything. I think some people would look at it as relationships in their life, right?
Yeah.
Like they have a relationship that's great and then it comes to an end. That's the journey of life, right? Like we make choices, takes us down one path. That chapter's closed. It was great. Okay, on to the next kind of feeling.
Do you think there is something like this was reversible, right? Uncomfortable and expensive, but reversible. I do think that is huge. There's certain things that are not reversible. So I'm grateful it was something like.
What about a nose job, right? So let's say you would have went to getting a nose job. That's a little hard to reverse, right? Like, I mean, can they? Yes. But if they're doing stuff to your nose, like it's a little bit harder to put it back the way it was. I'm not happy. It's kind of like, well, you did this. Or, I'm not familiar. Obviously, I've never had any plastic surgery and I don't think besides that, I don't know how reversible that is in certain respects, right? If people are getting things done to their face. So we talk about tattoos. So let's kind of jump into that, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there in their early 18s, 19s, they're getting the tramp stamp and it looks great and all the things. And then 15 years goes by and they're like, I don't know what the fuck I was doing, right? Yeah. But is it bothersome enough that they then go down the path of like, how do I get this removed? How do I cover it up? Or is it just an acceptance of that's who I am? It's something I did. It's a memory.
Well, I can kind of answer that too, because I've got 3 tattoos. One I got when I was 18. Ironically, I do not regret it at all.
Awesome.
But it's also mostly covered, right?
What is it? I have to ask.
Oh my God, it's so ridiculous. It's a Chinese character that supposedly means good luck and happiness. But I always joked that it means stupid white girl can't read Chinese. So, yeah. And then when I got pregnant, it like got kind of disfigured and then it went back to the way it was. But yeah, I don't regret that one. I also have one on my arm that I got when my dad passed away. I don't regret that one. I got one on the back of my shoulder when a friend passed. And it's not that I regret the tattoo. It didn't turn out well. I didn't do my research. I didn't find a fine point script, like somebody who writes in fine point. And so all the letters bled. It's way bigger than I would have wanted. And getting it removed would be a beast. And so I actually talked about getting it covered. And the guy was like, it would have to be massive to cover that. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. And I don't see it. So it doesn't bother me.
Right. I can't even at the moment picture it on the back of your shoulder. Maybe I can't really. But yeah, it's one of those things too. I think, when you have those tattoos that bother you, you overthink it more than the people that actually see it because they're processing. But I always think it's interesting, right? Like, because I have no tattoos. Besides having my ears pierced, like, I've never had any kind of plastic surgery, had other surgeries for things broken and hurt on my body. But, I always think to myself, would I get a tattoo? And the answer is, I don't know, right? Like there hasn't been something or that moment that's compelled me to put something somewhere on my body, but it's not to say I'm not open to it, right? Like when there's something that I feel like you said, when your dad passed away, that's very meaningful. Yeah. Like, a symbol on your body. And I think there's those moments where sometimes you're like, yeah, this makes sense and I want to see it. Yeah. And, it's there. So it is interesting. And I think, with our conversation today, not just thinking about, boob jobs and boob reductions or tattoos, I think it goes kind of to a deeper level of like, just because you can, should you? And that can go into the workplace, that can go into, relationships, that can go into spending excessive amounts of money. And it's all of those things that you kind of have to think about, right? Like just because you can, should you?
I know. And I always tell the girls, because Alyssa has, I don't even know how many tattoos now. She probably has more that I don't even know about, but I think at the very least 7, and they're all in fairly visible places. And Sean and I basically were like, please just don't do your neck or your face, you know?
Right, right, because you can't give those up, right?
Yeah. It, we've told the kids, we're like, if you do stuff, just make sure it's revert. And that goes for those gauges in your ears because you need plastic surgery to fix that too. Or like, just make sure it's something that you can cover or reverse, you know?
Right.
So, and it's their body. They're going to make their own choices. And they're old enough now, but that's our advice.
Yeah. Well, and I think it goes back to just like you talked about with the tattoo on your back. It goes back to the expectation versus the reality of what you think something might look like.
Yeah.
And it could be plastic surgery too versus a reality of like what it really is. And you had a very good experience with your breast implants, but I am sure there are many, many women that could have a story that didn't go so well, right?
There's so many. There's so many.
So I think, with tattoos too, you see a picture, you're like, oh, that looks great. And then you get it on your arm, you're like, oh, that did not look like you drink many margaritas and you're like, that looked different last night than it does this morning, So I think it's the preparation and the age of being like, okay, I accept that the outcome may not be the expectation that I have. Right. And that could be, I think we should talk a little bit about like how that could be in the workplace too. Like the expectation of taking a position and all the things you hear versus a reality of the actual position and what it entails, right?
Yeah. The highlights.
Yes, you are going to be doing all these things. And then you get into the position, you're like, I'm doing none of these.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a meme I think about. It shows a picture of everybody like partying and having a great time. It says the recruitment. And then it shows like somebody buckled down in a cubicle with gray walls and it says the reality. So it's just, and that's the same with anything, right? You have to know that it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows forever.
Let's talk about babies, right? So let's talk about kids because I think being moms, you have the expectation of what you think motherhood is going to be. You're like, it's not going to be all roses, but you also don't think it's going to be all thorns, right? But you have no idea. You can read all the books. You can prepare yourself. You can tell all your friends. But when you're actually take that child home and you are now that is your world and you are the sole provider for that human, it gets real, right? Like, wow, there are lots of things that people maybe didn't tell me or that they didn't experience. And
they did tell you and you were like, not me, I'm not, but I think about that every vacation, every family vacation. I have an expectation in my head versus the reality of how it turns out. And I still to this day, I'm like, there's one vacation that I was like the reality in my head and the expectation in my head and the reality matched up, and it was the best vacation with the kids. Like they got
this actually happened. Okay,
it actually happened. We went to New York around Christmas time, and I swear it was magical. And the kids were like, everybody got along, and it was so fun. And that is the one that I'm like, all the stars aligned. But that is so rare for that to happen.
Isn't that like it's just everything? And I love that you talk about travel and. You have this like in your mind, you've like made up, okay, it's going to be like this is what we're going to, and then you get there and you're like, this is absolutely like, it could be even a better way, or the perfect ways. Lines, but it is always just funny how your mind takes these different paths. You're like, it's going to be like this, and we're going to, and then you get there and you're like, not exactly, but okay, it's fun, right? Like it's just always very interesting. But no, I love that. I mean, is there anything else? I think let's just circle back around real quick to the implant story. I think it's a big one because I think a lot of women either are in those phases of considering getting breast implants, considering putting new ones in, considering getting them out. Any advice for those people in that thought process? It seems like you did your research, you thought about it, you found a very credible doctor. Is there any other things that now you're like, oh, okay, maybe I should have thought about this or ask these questions?
I mean, I think that you don't think about when your kids are 5 and 2, how you're going to have that conversation. Like I said, they knew about them the whole time, but I don't want them to get them. If they do, it's their decision, but it's not, you know what I mean? So, but even if I was like, I would never be able to say you can't do this because I did it. Right. So you don't think about that impact, I guess.
Actually, I'm going to go back. I think you can't say, I don't want you to do this. Because
I can say I prefer you, just like my dad did. Like, I really don't want you to do it, but it's your body. Like, but I feel like it's easy to say when you've done it.
So did the girls, when you chose, obviously they were much older when you got them out. What was their feedback when you told them you were getting them out? Did they have anything, or at this point they just
I don't think they cared when we were the old. Like, I don't, it's so funny. I'm like, I don't even know if it registered or they said anything. And it's just like, all right, whatever. They have their own life. They're good. But yeah, I think that the one thing that does surprise me is shirts just fit. Like, it's amazing how differently shirts fit. So when you get them, I was frustrated because they don't make shirts that are big enough to fit your chest and small enough to fit your waist, right? Like you have, it's just doesn't fit right. And then even with no boobs, it's things still don't fit right. So I'm like, I don't know what the answer is, but I do not apparently do not have proportional or ideal or whatever it is body. My friend and I were having a conversation about, I don't feel like my arms are like completely out of proportion, but if I buy a shirt that fits my torso, there it's tight on my arms. Right. So I'm like, I don't know what the deal is.
Maybe you should get into the clothing industry, Jenny.
I know. Well, what I really want is 3D printed clothing that you can print to your own specs. It'd be like, those patterns that moms had back in the 70s where they'd
Yes.
have a pattern and cut it out and make your clothes. I want that, but I want 3D printed and I want my own measurements just loaded in there. And I can be like, I need a shirt for this occasion. And you print it.
You know what? I bet that's already on tap somewhere. I bet somebody's working on this, right?
And if somebody's listening, please do it. I'm in.
That's what I always think of all these ideas I come up with. I'm like, this is such a good idea. And I'm like, yeah, I bet. Like, I'll Google it. And I'm like, oh, look at that.
I know, but you never know until you check, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
No idea is a bad idea.
Yeah.
I think this was great. I hope our listeners take away from this that, we're all going to make those choices, right?
Yeah.
Whatever they are, sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes like just in the unknown. But you know what? In most cases, there's always the opportunity to redirect yourself or get your implants out or, correct a bad decision or get a tattoo kind of covered up,
Your opinion changes. Like your opinion changes as you age. And it's like now I mean, I wouldn't put them back in, but I think that the financial impact might bother me more than it did back then. You know what I mean? I think that there's different things that are important to you as you age. And I'm like, why would I spend money on that when I could go on like amazing vacation with my family?
Right. This just made me think of something I saw. It was like this couple that had been married for, I don't even know, they were like in their 90s and they've been married 70 years. And somebody had asked the gentleman, like, what's been the success of your happy relationship? And he goes, realizing that I'm going to be married to a new woman every 10 years because my wife is constantly changing her opinion, changing her outlook, changing all the things, but just being adaptable to that and taking it as exciting. Like, oh, in 10 more years, like I'm going to have a new wife that has all these new opinions, but it's the same one, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think about that with like when you ask what's your favorite color, mine has shifted over the years, but you feel weird about it. It's like, you feel like you should stick with the same thing forever and ever. And that's just not reality. Like my opinion has changed about a lot of things.
Right. Yeah. No, totally. Awesome. Jenny, I think this has been great. I've really enjoyed learning more about this. I've never actually had an in-depth conversation about it. It's very interesting. And I hope our listeners gravitate towards just a better understanding of how that process works. And then, maybe they'll come up with some more questions and we'll revisit the conversation.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I'm open about it and I told people I had them. I will answer any questions that come up. So yeah, I'm totally, and we did cover all the questions that your friend sent in. So
perfect. Yay. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We hope everybody's enjoying and has enjoyed their summer. We know it's coming to a close, but we're excited. We've got a lot of exciting guests on tap coming up. So thanks for your time and wishing you all a great day.
Thank you.